Give a serious thank you to Rangle for helping us get these back off the ground. It's been a while, so if this is your first time, welcome. If it's your, not your first time, sorry it took so long. I know how hard it is to find free beer these days, so, hope you're having a good time already. We're going to jump right into the speaker track, and wanted to take a look around here. This is such an amazing space. We didn't have an opportunity to have a space for DevCycle to host, so serious thank you to Arctic for giving us the opportunity to use this whole massive office. I'm so shocked that this whole place is this big. It's been a while. So we're going to jump into the speaker track. The way this is going to work, we've got a couple of awesome talks that are coming up, and then at the end, we're going to do about 5-10 minutes for some Q&A. We're going to take a quick break so everybody can get the jitters out of them and go get another beer. I guess without further ado, we're going to go into our first one right here. Riaz Virani with 5 browser APIs you should know, but probably don't. So here you go.
Thank you. All right, so audio check. Am I pretty good in terms of loudness right here? All right, cool. Awesome. So thank you everyone for having me. I'm going to give you guys a talk about some browser APIs that you should probably know and maybe in some cases use more sporadically, but then the one time you need them, you'll find that you actually have access to them because there's not common APIs that we use. How many of you right now, just raise your hand, would say that you make your living as a web developer? Like someone pays you to write code, you write HTML, CSS. All right, about half of you. Cool. Awesome. So for those of you that are not necessarily web developers, the answer is at some point you're gonna touch a browser and you're gonna be writing something in the web. And so having an understanding of what the browser gives you is a really, really good idea. So I would say you should probably all get your phones out and grab that page right now, because what we're going to do in other parts of the presentation is all the APIs I'm showing you, I'm actually going to have little CodePen demos, and this is a link to the collection of all of them. So if you get lost, you always have access to this, and I would just leave it open in a tab. You can open any of the other demos we're going to look at. All right, cool. So the great part about having something like this means this presentation is not you just sit here quietly for 20 minutes and watch me ramble at you. You're going to get to play with the stuff that we're actually going to talk about. The question every single time I do a presentation I get asked, did ChatGPT write this presentation for you? And the answer is, in this particular case, no, I actually wrote most of this myself. In fact, I started the idea for the presentation before everyone went crazy for ChatGPT. But I do want to prove it to you because I asked ChatGPT what they would write about, and it was 4, we do talk about this API, but the other 4 of the 5, hello? Okay. The other 4 APIs they list are not the ones that we are going to talk about today. But they're also great APIs you should learn about if you don't know. They're just probably ones that I think are a bit harder to demo and are very low level. So the rest of the format of this talk is going to be, I'll give you a quick overview of the browser API we want to discuss and explore. What does it do? What feature, or where is it supported in terms of what browsers, and then fun facts about it. And then we'll do a demo, which means you'll get to use your phones to go to a CodePen where we'll actually get to interactively play with that particular API. So the presentation is interactive. Another thing you should know, because we're doing all this live, which I always find more fun, and we're not done a strict recording, some of you are not going to get this to work, and some of it may not even work on my computer, but that makes it a lot more exciting, isn't it? Especially if it gets recorded. So let's go. Let's do it. I'm excited. All right, so the very, very first one we're going to talk about is the picture-in-picture API. How many of you have ever used this API before? I've done this presentation twice before, not recorded, but it's one hand, right? There was always 1 or 2 hands, and I was yes, okay. I don't actually know why they made this API, except for something that seemed really kind of novel at the time. But what does it allow you to do? It allows you to display video in a floating video outside of the browser that floats above other windows. So you think of old TVs with a picture-in-picture where you could watch. Am I tapping something funny? I feel like I'm not.
No, there's another microphone up there, right? Oh, right here.
There's that one, yeah. There's someone trapped in the microphone using Morse code to get out.
Cover your ears, just in case. We'll trade.
This one's off.
Thank you.
This one's on. Okay. I feel like this one's louder. It's louder, right? Okay. All right, so it allows you to show video in a floating window above the other windows, kind of like you might have a floating window that's playing music or something that's always on top. And these are the browsers where it's supported. So a lot of these APIs are universally supported, and you'll kind of see this like grayish tilde next to Firefox. I'll talk about it in a bit, but Firefox essentially started doing this API as a thing you could just right-click and do on any video before they had a specification, and then refused to change their custom implementation to match the specification. Because they were like, we'd have to remove the thing we've had for 10 years in here before you guys had an idea to make it a specification. So they are just like, whatever, we just won't be compliant. Fun fact, before we actually do the demo, it was actually first introduced by Safari in 2016. Gasp. Safari being the first one to introduce an API onto a browser. And then Android 8 weirdly implemented it first before it even got working in Chrome, which blew my mind because like, why would you do picture-in-picture on a phone? Like that, yeah, but YouTube, would that be a native API? This is a browser API. So like when you're on one website, and if you navigate away from the website, it stops working. So it's only on the same website that you would have picture-in-picture. Ads, yeah. All right, so demo. This is where you guys get to. This is a specific QR code for just that demo. I'll leave it open for just like another couple seconds, but then we're going to jump over to it. So this is the picture-in-picture demo, and I'll zoom in for you.
I literally just brought my phone up and you switched.
Too slow. This is where I need picture-in-picture for the QR code to be visible. All right, so I'll show you how it's actually doing. So I just have a code pen that is, actually, see, how are you going to come through the speaker? I don't know. It's a video, so if I play it, right, and I hit enter picture-in-picture mode, that is the same thing. And this is native to the browser. Then I can hit exit, and it comes back here. And the way that I did that fancy magic was, there's someone in there. I'm not moving my hand at all. But yeah, you have just a video element. If you look at the HTML, just a video element, and then there's a button. So we grab the video element, we grab the button. Picture-in-picture enabled is us checking if that's a feature enabled in this browser, which it should generally be. And if it's enabled in the browser, yeah. If it's enabled in the browser, we stop disabling the button. And then we add an event lister where when you click on the button, if there already is a picture-in-picture, so this is a magic name that if there can only be one picture-in-picture element per page, you can't have like 5 of them floating around, then essentially we will exit, and if we previously had not made a picture-in-picture element, it will request picture-in-picture element. So none of these calls are like functions I define. Like this part, and this part, meaning those 3 elements are kind of part of the specification. And the bottom one is just changing the text on the button when you click it and don't click it. So yeah, and therefore you can even listen to events on the video element of like when it entered picture-in-picture and when it exited picture-in-picture. So I'm going to be honest with you, some of these things I'm showing you are really cool, but not that useful, and some of them are going to be really useful. This one is just really cool. Like I think I can think of like 5 use cases, and if you're in a sort of company that has to do media elements, this could actually be something practical, but for the rest of you, it's like, well, we don't know the browser can do that. Like that's not even the custom stuff, that's just like 5 lines of code, and the browser can do all that for you. We'll do questions at the end, so rather than, we could stop and do questions the entire time, but what I actually like to do is, I like to ask you guys questions, more so than you ask me questions. So every single API, we're going to do a pop quiz question. Funny thing, the answers are not in the slides, and then if you get them right, I will throw a piece of candy at you. So, who's ever seen me do this before in a presentation? I love throwing candy. It's like it's the reason I present, is to throw candy at people. And I've definitely had a couple of cases where I've hit people in the head with it. Because if you use like the little Snickers, like Halloween candy, it has the tips and wings and flutters. So if you try to get it way back there, no go. All right. So what media controls allow custom styling when in picture-in-picture mode? Does that make sense? Like what the elements of control, what can you actually style? The play pause button, the exit picture-in-picture mode button, permanently disabled PIP, or none of them? You're supposed to raise your hands. All right. None of you raised your hands, so none of you are eligible for candy. Someone raise your hand and answer. Yeah. Yes. It's none. Because if you could, I mean, just think of how complex that would be. Like, you could be like, I want my button to be like 250 pixels, and it just makes it really confusing to have the browser control that. And even a security issue, you can make the button so big, no one can control it, because you're not in the browser window anymore. You're not within the tab. So they're very, very restrictive. This is an easy one. Oh, God. These eggs are like really easy to toss. Okay. The Beacon API. Who's heard of the Beacon API before? 1, 2. These usually go up in level of popularity as we go. All right. So the Beacon API is people actually kind of think historically. I've said this, and they think it's like the Apple Beacon, you know, like tracking. It's not that at all. It's not at all tracking. It is often used by trackers on the internet, but it's not there to like track devices and hardware and geolocation. But essentially, it allows you to send API requests and guarantee that they'll be sent. And it's commonly used by you're tracking something when the page closes. So how many of you ever like done something on like window.before unload, which is like, I need you to do this whenever the page is about to close. Oftentimes it's send an API request that someone's closing the page, right? So like I know when they've closed the page and they're no longer on it for a security thing or whatever. Well, if you ever do that, it's completely unreliable if you use regular XML, like sort of a XML, basically API calls, because you're closing the thing that's making the call, right? So if it doesn't occur in the right amount of time, it's not going to go out the door. So this is actually an API in every single browser, and what it does is it guarantees that the browser will send the request. Yeah.
Is this like a cookie thing, or is this actually?
No, it's not really the cookies. So we'll see in a second, but you register a call you want it to make, send a beacon. So you can't do any JavaScript, but send a beacon. Essentially, the browser puts it on a queue to say, this is something I have to do. And then it guarantees it will send it. Now, you can't listen for the response because it's like your page could have been closed for 10 minutes when it did that. But it guarantees it'll go out the door. So the use case for this, for me, it happened in working at a company that had a financial application. And we were like, well, we need to track this for when people having multiple tabs open, et cetera. We need to know when it's closed to track that session as being done for like a PCI compliance thing. And we then had to use this by specification because it's the only thing that guarantees it going out the door. Funny enough, the specification, which I did not believe this, so I actually skimmed the specification, does not tell them how big of a message you can try to send. So like, it's actually kind of like fairly expansive. And also, a lot of websites now use cores for security in terms of their APIs. You can't use cores because it's like, throws it out the door and it just assumes it has to work without any sort of back and forth. So, quick demo of this. Another QR code for you guys. Be faster. Get your QR code fast. But if you're actually on that very first collection on CodePen, you can essentially just open another tab because it'll be listed there. This is going to be the fastest demo ever. All right, so there's a button, and then we click Send Beacon, which will send the beacon because essentially the button, I'll minimize this to make it a bit bigger. The button says navigator.sendBeacon to this URL with some data, and the data says I'm here. That's it. Now, you can get the result back, but it's unreliable. Like it's like you may not get it back, and more often than not, the only time you would really want to do this is like realistically in a window.before unload, right? Which is where you get that guarantee. There's no practical reason to do it just on a button click. But what we'll do is Some of you, I'm assuming, have hit the button, because I know I can't stop you. So this is a little tool that just records the incoming requests, and these are all you hitting that button. So this is the request showing up. Some of you are malicious. So real life use case for that API is pretty much tracking. It's ad network tech. If you're ever working in an advertising network, tracking when people are opening and closing the page, it's really useful for metrics because it guarantees it goes out the door. You would think that a regular API call is guaranteed, but it is only guaranteed while the browser context is open. So if you've got like mobile phones that are freezing or unfreezing or throttling you, then you have no guarantee. Yeah.
What if you end the execution of the browser? Would it prevent it to be sent?
Only if the browser itself is gone, but it still will send it when it. Well, you know what? I'm not going to give you an answer to that because that's actually what the question is. Fast one. That's not what you're doing there. All right. How long can the browser take to send your request if under load? There is no limit. 30 seconds, 5 minutes, or 30 minutes. And if you guys are pulling up the RFC specification in your phones, shame on you. You have to guess. Raise your hands. Yeah. Yeah.
30 seconds.
Nick. Yeah, behind you. Yeah. A? Yes, there's no limit. They could send the request 2 days later. Alright, man. If I can get like 5 for 5 today, so happy. Yeah, this was surprising to me. There's nothing tells the browser, like the browser can just be like, I'm busy right now. And usually what it does, if it's really under heavy CPU load, or it will wait, or if there's other stuff happening, it'll just wait. Yeah.
There's another really nice application for that for performance because it's asynchronous, so it's not blocking your CPU. So like if you want to send performance data or
Correct.
something, or tracking data, etc., like it will not influence the performance of the application.
That is actually correct. Yeah, a lot of I think behind the scenes, Google Analytics that uses beacons for sending all of its data about page metrics because it doesn't the browser is explicitly told, hey, you don't need to do this right now. I don't need this response. You essentially do this in your own time, and it often will wait if it's under heavy load and just kind of do it in its own downtime. Yeah, so you let the browser kind of manage the load. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Well, the lack of a limit kind of makes sense because if, say, the internet goes down, you never know when it goes back up, right?
Correct.
For example, if Rogers goes down for half the country.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a corollary to this, which is it'll go out the door, but if it fails, you'll never know. So there is that corollary to it. So use it with caution. All right, this one again, that one had some implication. This one is just purely fun, and then we have another one with 2 that are actually really practical. Who even knows that this is a remote thing you could do in a browser? The vibration API. You just like all the weird browser APIs, don't you? Yeah. I weirdly actually, I used this in a real world application back in 2014 on a personal project, which was a way for audiences to give feedback to presenters, and every time they would swipe, without looking at their phone, it would vibrate the phone, so that they would get haptic feedback that it had worked without having to look at the phone. And that is the only real use case for this API. But if you haven't deduced, what it does is it just shakes your phone. You know how your phone just vibrates when you get a notification? You can just shake someone's phone for no reason. Except, okay, well, 80% of you in this audience can't because Apple blocked it. In fact, they never supported it. For some reason, it's available on all the other browsers, and weirdly enough, even on Chrome on desktop, because I guess there's some Chromebooks out there with haptic kind of devices in them, so you can shake their laptop. Yeah, I've never seen one, but apparently they exist in some markets. So, yeah, this first was actually the first draft of this was back in 2011, and I can kind of get if you think of that time, right? Tablets were new, phones were new. Everyone was let's just do all the things. It was such a frontier. Enabling every single API made a lot of sense. And there is just one more caveat: that the vibration only works when when your tab is in focus. If you navigate away, it doesn't exactly work. All right, demo. Don't even bother if you're not using an Android device. This is not going to work. No. So if you're using iOS, they only allow one rendering engine on the phone. So even if you're using like Chrome or Firefox, it's just a wrapper around Safari. So I can show you this code, but of course, it's just a button, and then you have on click of the button we do navigator.vibrate. And this pattern is essentially, if you give it an array, if you give it a number, it'll just vibrate that number of milliseconds. If you give it an array, it'll vibrate, pause, vibrate, pause, vibrate, pause. When I wrote this, I thought it was really clever because this is actually a musical pattern, and I forgot what it was. Who? Huh? It's numbers of milliseconds, so it's odd, even, where it's like the first number is vibrate this number of seconds, then the second number is a pause, and the third number is vibrate. So as many elements in the array, it'll vibrate, pause, which is that's not really that useful to like. Well, maybe you want to communicate something to the user with like vibrate or something like that in a short kind of stint. But things you can do in a browser you probably didn't know. You can just shake someone's phone for no reason.
I recently, actually, a few days ago, I experienced this one for like a chatbot.
Okay, that makes
when
sense.
When you're navigating around the page, it will collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so pop quiz. What happens in desktop Chrome if your hardware doesn't support vibration? Will you get a blinking tab? Will you get nothing? Will you get a warning about the page using unsupported APIs? Or boom, you're dead?
Definitely D.
D, all right. No, we'll just all be dead. Yes? Yeah, it's B. Were you on your laptop? No? All right, so there you go. Huh? You answered the question.
Oh, was it me?
Yeah, you answered it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not gonna make attention. Oh my god.
This does not make me think it's like a Blue Jays game where everyone's like watching people catch foul balls. All right, the constraint validation API. So it's the second last API. This one, highly practical. When I learned about it, I was like, this is amazing. I've now used that in probably every other project. So, okay, most of you, I assume, are writing React, Vue, or whatever. But in some cases, you're writing, I assume, plain HTML. If you're in WordPress land, you're writing a lot of plain HTML. So you're using validations for your forms that are probably built into HTML inputs, right? Like min, max, whatever. Well, I've always wondered, like, why can I not write my own validations? Like, why do I have to rely upon the 5 shitty ones that are built into HTML inputs? Turns out you can, and this has been around forever, and it's very like small numbers of code to add your own validations. So you can have like an HTML input, and you can simply add like, hey, I want this to only be even numbers, right? And like a couple lines of JavaScript, and it'll use the browser native validation, messaging, pop-ups, all that stuff for you. It's worked everywhere, including IE forever. You can also style those validation messages too, which to me was like, that was a big reason for me to move my forms to something like React, was to have better validation for some cases, like sign-in forms and things. Yeah. All right, so demo. And I'll, before you kind of, the practical use case to me always was if I had a really simple HTML form, you have like password and password confirmation, you need them to match. There's no standard thing in the HTML validations to be like, can you make sure these two match, right? And then I'd be like, oh, I gotta like move this over to like JavaScript and write a whole bunch of stuff to get this to work correctly. Well, there it is. All right, so just to kind of show you first, right? And I'll reload this. So like, and then this is not gonna match. Submit. And that's the sort of like Chrome native whatever, right? I hate that these must match. So if you look on the HTML side, it's just 2 inputs, type password. They have a name and a name password and name confirmation. But on the JS side, essentially we just grab those 2 inputs, and I wrote a custom function this is my JavaScript called check password validity, which is like essentially if the value of one doesn't match the other, set, this is the magic part right here, the set custom validity. Because remember, password is like the HTML input element. You can set custom validity to be empty string, which means it's valid, or set it to a string, which means, hey, this is invalid. Probably easier if it's not wrapping. And then simply on change of the password or password confirmation element, you run check password validity. So that was it. Does that kind of make sense? Like that's actually probably the most interactive code we've had so far that has like stuff has to happen. You grab the inputs, you write a function that essentially like checks what you want to check, and whenever there's an error condition on that input, you do set custom validity. That's not a thing I wrote, that's built into the browser, and then you just have to run it, right, on change of the input. That's it. Should I, would it be easier for you guys if I just spoke loud enough? Like, is this good enough for you guys? Okay. I feel like otherwise you guys are going to be like traumatized, like, there's going to be a... All right. I will try to speak up as much as possible because it is quite of a bigger room. So how many of you, like, would that actually be something that's even remotely practical? Because like for me, there are cases where I run into like plain HTML forms for other people's sites or just simpler websites, and I'm like, oh, that's the one thing I was missing, right? It was a really simple way to add my own validations to forms. So raise your hands real quick. That's the one I find people find the most interesting. All right, a couple of you, good. Some good came out of today. But now we have a pop quiz. What is the only browser that doesn't support this API? Is it the Tesla car browser? Which actually is a fork of Android. The console in Tesla is actually a fork of Android. Nothing. C is Opera Mini, or D, the Baidu browser. This is a hard one. This is a very hard one. You got to raise your hand. No, one of them, that is incorrect. One of them does not support this API. Yeah. See, yes, it is Opera Mini. There we go. All right, 4 for 4 so far. Yeah, it's you can make it work in the Tesla car, but you can't make it work on Opera Mini. All right, we have the final API, the page visibility API. So this is a fairly simple API. It just lets you find out when the page is focused or unfocused, meaning if you had 5 tabs open and you're on a different tab, you're unfocused. If you're on that tab, you're focused. Focus meaning is it in the foreground. It works everywhere. And the answer is like browsers will like throttle pages differently when they're in the foreground or background. This is actually something that Chrome has gotten really aggressive on recently. So the reason you're going to want to know this is you may have certain things that you're like, hey, when I've got this like maybe application doing some polling, etc., I want to turn that off or turn it down to save my server requests. Like, why am I throttling for X, Y, and or polling for something every 30 seconds if the user's not even seeing it, right? Oh, interesting fun fact. Slack in its early days, they didn't think about this, and they caused a bunch of crashes and problems in their application till they started using this very basic API in early days of Slack to basically stop asking to load everything, like all the updates to your Slack messages in the background when the page wasn't in focus. Yeah, it was actually really funny. And I was like, shouldn't they know this? And it's like, well, when you're growing that fast, you just forget about things. And they spent a huge amount of time trying to figure out why their stuff was slowing down and crashing and taking a bunch of memory until they were like, maybe you just don't need to do so much when it's in the background. So, someone had a question? Oh, okay. All right, so final demo. Yep. All right, so this one's really, really simple. And this is, different one. The wrong one. I don't think I have that one open. All right. So I'm going to navigate away. I'm just going to demo it first. So I'll navigate away, and I come back, it now has changed that text to I missed you because it noticed that I went away and come back, and then but you're back now. If I go back away, again, I missed you, but now you're back. So all we're doing in the HTML is we just have this simple header tag. So I'm not going to go into that. But all we did was we listened for visibility change, which is an event that the browser will broadcast whenever something becomes visible or invisible. And then you check the state of the document saying, is it currently hidden, right? And actually, you can never see this part. But when you come back, meaning that you are not hidden, it'll say, I missed you, and then set a timeout where 3 seconds later, it'll change it back to, but you're back now. So you could orchestrate this in your own application to just say, like, hey, whenever there's a visibility change and you are hidden, maybe like track all of your polling or track a bunch of the stuff you're doing in your application and stop it. And then when they come back, or at the very least, what you might want to do is say when they come back, let's say you have a site where the page just loads and it just sits there, right? But you could make it so that whenever they go away and come back, you refetch the data, right? And some libraries have made that easier, like if and even using a stale while revalidate from like the Next.js team, or React Query kind of does this too, where it'll refetch the data when you come back. And the way it knows that is it's tracking this API under the hood in the library to know when people have navigated away and back. All right. Pop quiz. The API has a bug where visibility change fires twice in a particular browser version. Which one? A is Chrome 38. B is Safari 9. C is Fire OS 12. And D is Safari 11. Yeah. C? Nope. B? No.
D?
No. Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, I feel so good about this. Yeah, it's Chrome 38 had that bug. There we go. Oh, I know. But it is just the one you would expect to not, yeah, and then they like just, they had a bug and they first were like, no, it's not a thing. And then they were like, oh my God, there really is a bug. And they had to issue a patch. And that's one of those updates you got. All right, the final one, broadcast channel API. Who's used this before? All right. Well, this is actually one that you probably should for your own app security. So it allows you to send messages to other open tabs. So like if your user has 5 tabs open on your site, imagine they log out of one. Like, should you not also log them out of the other? Because if they just don't close the other ones down and someone comes by, they can see all the data, right? So essentially, it allows you to broadcast messages to all of the tabs, and they can listen for an event. This works everywhere. There are also other APIs that are very similar. There's one called the Channel Messaging API, and it can communicate with iframes. So if you've got some technical reason why some other part of your business has to iframe a site onto one other page, you can talk back and forth between the iframes.
Can you send to a tab that is not your URL that you're using?
And you're like the perfect segue. That's the next bullet point right here. You can use the cross-document messaging API to talk to pages open for other domains. Now, there's more security involved in that where they have to explicitly say, hey, I want to listen to this other domain and this message to listen to it. So it's not like you can just tell them. You can tell them whatever you want, but they have to specifically say they want to listen for it too.
So it's more about listen to than
PayPal checkout. PayPal checkout.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so like if you have domain A and domain B, like domain B has to say, I want to listen to message through from domain A, and then domain A can broadcast it. If you just broadcast it from domain A, it'll go into the ether, but nothing will listen to it. So yeah, yes, you can talk between domains. So I realized when I did this and I started using my own phone, it's like your phone will freak out. There's 2 QR codes, so I will just do that. But if you have the list originally, there's just a broadcast sender and a broadcast receiver, and that's about it. That's all you'll need. All right. So
So this works on mobile as well.
Yeah. Well, so the thing with mobile is that you don't actually know if the other tabs are still running because mobile phones are very aggressive about like essentially killing tabs in the background in terms of actual running. So if they're not running, they won't hear it. So it's not as useful for mobile. I understand that way. Okay, so all we have is one tab that will send a message. You can even do this in CodePen, right? Whenever we click, it's going to, on this broadcast channel, it's going to say, can you hear me? It's going to post the message, can you hear me, on the channel called demo. And on the other side, there's no current message, right? Oh, that's because I already did it when I was practicing. Yeah, it'll say no message, but essentially it is listening on the same channel named demo. It is listening for a message, and whenever it gets the message, whatever the data was in the message text, it'll set that on here, right? So like, here, I'll do this. So we know it's actually really working, right? So we're going to post the message, can you hear me, meetup group? So I'll send it, and then over here, it says that because it heard the message and put it down on the text. So practical use case for this, we'll go with this like, but the really practical use case I find consistently is everyone should be doing this on logout. Like if people have sensitive data up on the screen and they're logging out in one tab, you really shouldn't have all these other tabs they maybe forgot about that are showing their personal information. They're indicating the intent to log out. You should at least tell all the other tabs to also log themselves out and clear their data. So what can you send in a broadcast channel API message? Strings, valid JSON, anything, or Booleans. D? Nope, it's not D. Well, someone who's not yet gone yet. All right, way in the back. This is going to be my challenge for my candy throwing. Which, sorry? B? No, it's not B. Yeah? C? Yes, it is anything. Anything, you can send functions, you can send whatever you want. All right. All right. So, that is my presentation. Very I think we might have ran a little bit. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, it's just anything that will work in JavaScript that you can send. Technically, yes, although I have not tried this in every browser. Basically, there's nothing in the specification stopping you from doing that. So
It's only one way.
it is also one way, yeah. But no, and this is where I think currying I feel won't work correctly. But there's nothing in the specification stopping you from trying to send something. It just like if it's currying data that's in the context of the other tab, I don't think it's going to work correctly. I think it has because tabs are isolated, so they have to copy whatever it is over.
But there is a library from PayPal called PostRobot, which overcomes that. It creates like a what do we call it? Promise-based between two tabs.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I also have a feeling that you're going to get erratic behavior between browsers and their security policies if you're sending more than something that's not just sort of JSONifiable, right? So like there probably are libraries that are trying to work with all the gimmicks that, because there's nothing defined in the specification saying what they can block off. Also, these are the slides if anyone wants them. I'll leave them while we have the questions. Any other questions? Cool. Awesome. Yeah.